Havard from Nscale, CCO at Nscale, who's going to deliver a keynote on 3 things sovereign AI must deliver: control, compliance, and growth. Take it away, Karl.
Thanks. Let's wait for everyone to settle down. Is there anything to move my slides? I guess this is the... is it? So let's try what we've got. We don't have a screen yet. That's all right.
So we're just waiting a couple of moments.
That's right. Yeah.
And just steady the ship. How are you so far today, Karl?
Yeah, good.
Yeah?
Caught the end of that discussion, so that's good. Oh,
Awesome.
We're up.
Okay, ready to rock.
Amazing.
Take it away, Karl.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. It seems to be that sovereignty is the trendy buzzword of the day. Excuse me. Just a little intro to Nscale and the way we talk about sovereignty. It's full stack. So it's everything from energy all the way up to building data centers, deploying the AI infrastructure, models on top, etc. So that's what we do. We're coming out of Europe and the UK, and therefore we want to be an alternative for organizations, governments across the region compared to the US hyperscalers. But first of all, I think these 3 organizations specifically need a lot of kudos. You know, it was 20 years ago that they decided that their business could offer cloud infrastructure to organizations across the globe. I'm not sure what we in Europe and the UK were doing at that particular time, but the boat left the port, and I think in the last 20 years we have been very dependent upon these organizations. I think every single organization out there has some form of cloud presence or even multi-cloud presence. And what they've been able to do is provide access to evergreen technology. So any of you of the same age as me, maybe slightly younger, can remember that time. Everything was on-premise. The CIO had to manage the on-premise environment, had to patch things, had to test things, had to buy things, and therefore when cloud came along, a lot of those issues were resolved. It enabled the speed of innovation to accelerate. It wasn't the IT department holding everyone back. The latest technology was made available and innovation then flew off the table. And they removed the CapEx burden. So the CFOs were happy at that particular time. I think they've done some sums since then, and maybe it's not necessarily that cost effective in some areas, but the ability to move from a CapEx to an OpEx was a very attractive proposition. And they pioneered the path for AI infrastructure. So where we are today, without these guys, we probably wouldn't be in the position to be able to host the NVIDIA, the AMD, the Intel, etc., GPUs and accelerators in the way that we do. So what's happened, though, is the times have changed. So the whole industry has been level set. So the ability to host H100s, H200s, Blackwells, Grace Blackwells, etc., means the whole data center industry has had to redesign and reconfigure itself, which has given really the opportunity and hence the emergence of neo-clouds like ourselves coming to the fore over the last 2 to 3 years. So the AI infrastructure needs high-density power. The whole way of actually putting the racks together, putting the bus bars in place is a different game. The latest technology requires liquid cooling, ideally direct-to-chip liquid cooling, which again needs a complete reconfiguration of the data center, which means the legacy data centers of old can't cope with this. And therefore, there's a massive arms race, which was used in the previous panel, in order to be able to build data centers that can house AI infrastructure correctly, which means it's really difficult for organizations to move on-premise as well. I think the reliance of external data centers is still the way to go, but when it comes to sovereignty, which we'll define in a second, then is the US hyperscaler now the de facto choice if you're in the UK or in Europe? By the way, the US hyperscalers are sovereign, but only in the US. The other thing which is unpredictable at the moment, and I think President of the United States, Donald Trump, is probably our biggest salesperson at this moment in time, is the ability to understand what's going on in the whole geopolitical situation. And the unpredictability of that on every level is causing the EU, the Far East and the UK to now start to look internally and they have the ability to take control. So sovereignty is not a buzzword. I just want to draw attention to some of those images on the right-hand side. So the top one, clearly AI-generated data center of the future, or today. These are actual screenshots below. So you must be familiar with the Cloud First or the Patriot Act, which the US can call on anybody at any time if you're using a US-centered service. In fact, if you Google the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, a fellow called Karl, he had his access denied to his own Microsoft Teams through that act being called upon him. So the chief prosecutor of the ICC couldn't get access to what he wanted to get to, purely because the act was called by Donald Trump. The other thing we're seeing is Russian trawlers hovering over internet cables in the Atlantic. Now, that's just provocation. Obviously, the submarines do the work under the sea, should they wish to. But it's a statement to the rest of the world that they know where the cables are. And imagine what your business would do if that main network cable between the US and Europe was cut. You'd be put in a very difficult position. And then, of course, you have the tariffs not yet affecting us in cloud world, but who knows, they might do. And then that other image is about the Stargate. So 500 billion from the US invested into AI, which means if you want to get hold of AI in Europe, you've got to compete also with the big spends from the US organizations. So the whole landscape has changed, which is why sovereignty is key. And therefore, if I can break it down into three areas, and I'll go into a little bit more detail. The first is control, and that is the ability to develop and deploy and manage using your own sovereign infrastructure. And when we say infrastructure, we don't just mean the GPUs, we actually mean the energy that powers the data centers, the people that build and own the data centers, and then how the AI infrastructure internally is then bought, domiciled into your sovereign territory, and then put out as a service from a domicile organization. So that's absolutely key to have that level of control. The other thing is compliance. So not just nation compliance, it's actually industry compliance. And therefore, in the UK, the FCA have a whole bunch of things about backup strategy, where you need to have your data, and should anything go down, the time it takes to switch over, where that should be residing. That also needs to comply now to a sovereign aspect. And key point there is not being subject to the legislations of a foreign land. And then finally, growth, which is very much overlooked. And that is a case of, if you're going to deploy sovereign AI, and we're working a lot with the UK government at this moment in time, one of their key considerations is AI should be a vehicle to boost the economy, to increase the level of GDP. And therefore, if you look at the full stack of not just power all the way through to enablement of software models, but the whole building of the AI ecosystem, how it supports UK enterprises and UK startups, that should have a direct impact on the GDP and the economy of the sovereign territory that you're in. It's often reported about the number of jobs that are created through building a data center. It's so much more than that. So, diving in quickly into control then, some very simple statements to, if sovereignty is important to you, then here are some key statements that hopefully will bring it home for reality. So, do you know where your infrastructure is and can you touch it? So if you're deploying your AI models, if you're training, if you're tuning, if you're inferencing, do you know exactly where you're inferencing from? Now, data sovereignty sometimes gets mixed up with just where the data resides. But as you'll see going forward, it's more than that. It's a key part of it, but it's more than where the data resides. So can you visit it? Have you got the ability to go to your servers and actually touch it? The other thing is, if you can, do you need a passport to get there? If that's the case, then the chances are it's not sovereign. Who controls your access, both physical and digital? So I gave the example of the chief prosecutor of ICC. That's just one small example. But physically, who controls your access to the data center? Now, there are services provided by the US hyperscalers which allow servers to be resident in your data centers inside Europe. The challenges are, though, you can't actually do anything with them. You can't access them. The other thing is, what's the energy source? And we saw, 2-3 years ago, Europe was reliant upon an energy source that wasn't generated from within inside Europe. The pipeline was cut off, and that caused a massive financial burden on a lot of the UK enterprises, and that had to be regenerated themselves. And then who switches that plug on and off? So these are the sort of things that, if you don't have this level of control, then there's a good chance that you are not sovereign, if sovereignty is what you need. And then the final thing, who sets the pricing, who sets the tariffs? So that's control. Moving quickly on to compliance. So for both sovereign kingdom and industry sector, then it's more than GDPR. Obviously, GDPR is a key element to that. But you're going to be training, tuning, and inferencing your LLMs or MMLs, whichever type of model you're using, trained on petabytes of very sensitive and secure data. You may pick an open source foundational model, but if you're tuning it for your own business, then you'll bring your own data to the party. And therefore, you want to have full control over who has sight of that. First thing is where do you put it? Ideally within the kingdom that you are within. And then who has access? Can you control that access? And the other aspect is who could legally gain access to your data if they wanted to. And again, that sort of points towards the cloud first act. And finally, what's your disaster recovery aspect? Are you backing up to a foreign land? Are you backing up somewhere else? Or is it within your sovereign kingdom and it fits the compliance of being, say, 150 miles or 150 kilometers distance in between the two? And then finally, growth. So the link between, and Jensen Huang talks about this, he talks about the link between energy and intelligence and the direct path between that, which I think is absolutely correct. I think what also happens with that is once you've got the intelligence, it needs to do something, not just offer new products and services, but if you're talking sovereignty, it needs to boost the economy, and therefore there should be some economic growth associated with it. But not just economic growth. It's got to be about creating jobs. I mentioned before, excuse me, you have press releases which talk about 500 jobs have been created to build the data center, 150 jobs then created to maintain the data center. The data center is one slither of what's happening in between. The data center is the central point of actually enabling all the startups, improving the efficiency of UK sovereign enterprises, EU sovereign enterprises, etc. So you can do a 10, maybe 20x on those numbers accordingly. And then does it directly boost the growth at every single level? So are you using sovereign energy? Are you using sovereign data centers, etc., etc.? So that includes also the networking, which was raised on the panel before. And therefore, what's really interesting when people get into sovereignty, it's re-energizing the telcos within each region. So if you're with a telco or you're working with telcos, BT in the UK, Deutsche Telekom obviously in Germany, they already have the infrastructure in place. So they're ready-made to deploy generative AI within their domains, and therefore they are naturally sovereign by default. So they can ensure they have that level of security for each nation. So for us, great partners across Europe and in the UK. Talked about the catalyst to accelerate startups and enterprises. And I think if you're not familiar with what the UK is doing, the UK government in the AI Opportunities Action Plan have launched 5 AI growth zones. Some still to be, in fact, 4 out of 5 are still to be announced. One in Culham, which is linked to the Atomic Energy Authority. But as well as having the power and availability to deploy, there's a key element around building innovation centres, training centres, incubators for startups. And I think if the UK will move forward in this way, which they intend to do, just need to be a bit faster, then we can sort of work out a fabric that goes across the AI growth zones in order to enable collaboration across research institutions, across startups, etc., and then create this national grid of AI, which I think is the ultimate vision we wish to get to. And then the other thing is, AI is great, but to people on the street, and there's been research done across Europe and UK, 99% of people on the street, we're quite a niche audience, we understand this stuff, but 99% of people on the street don't really truly understand what AI is, how it's going to impact their lives, and therefore they sort of turn a blind eye to it. However, what organisations and sovereign governments should be thinking about is, as well as deploying AI, it's done so for improved healthcare, for drug research, all the good use cases that we're aware of, and probably not presented to the public as AI, but presented to the public to be able to enhance their lives across a various bunch of services. And then the final thing, does the revenue stay within the sovereign kingdom? Or does it touch the shores of the kingdom and then end up in some bank account in a different land? So that's for us, a key point. And then finally, will it retain and nurture top talent? We're working with a bunch of universities across the UK, and the PhD research teams, they all have 30 to 60 days in their contracts, because allegedly they're not paid a lot, but they have 30 to 60 days in their contracts which allow them to work for private enterprises. Guess who they're employed by? Meta, Google, etc., Microsoft, OpenAI even. And therefore, it would be great if each sovereign kingdom could give them the vehicle and facility to employ them, and then take the best brains in the research community and offer them out to the companies across the UK or Europe, wherever they may be. So in final slide, you'll be pleased to know, the three main things is, for control, can you deploy a private AI cloud? If you don't have the facilities yourself, can you choose a partner in your kingdom which can offer you that service and also offer you the transparency to come and visit, touch it, look at the sustainability angle with it, etc., etc. Very available today. Obviously, the laws of the kingdom that you reside within, and you're not subject to the laws of other kingdoms. And then building out the talent and the economy accordingly. So I think I'm at time. I hope I'm not too far over. We don't do questions. We've got time for questions?
We can do one question.
Okay, so happy to take a question. If you haven't got any, then we're on booth 20. Happy to chat there. But if there are any questions, happy to take one. Great.
Thank you very much. It's been really interesting. I mean, this is maybe a bit far-fetched, but there is definitely some inequality in terms of energy resources, geographically. Kind of, how do you see this evolve, especially kind of for Europe, Switzerland? I'm really interested in Switzerland.
Oh, in Switzerland, sorry. Yeah, I may not be able to comment specifically on Switzerland, a landlocked country, obviously, which is a challenge. You can't use offshore. I can talk about the UK, and I can talk about the issue the UK has. So the UK has a lot of offshore renewable energy, up to 6.5 gigawatts per annum. The UK national grid just can't take it. So it's just wasted, which is a real shame. So there is an energy council that's been set up through the government, and I think it needs to be government-led, in order to find a way to re-energise the national grid, built many, many years ago, and to be able to absorb and take the renewable energy in. And is there some form of storage element of power in between? Without doing that, then what will happen is data centres will build their own power sources, and therefore the local communities where data centres are built won't benefit. So it will be a fail if that happens. So what we're trying to help the UK government do is make sure that the national grid, the renewable energy sources and the data centre builds are all coordinated together. So you do get that genuine byproduct. If a data centre gets built, energy prices go down for the local citizens, then ideally they see the data centres in a slightly more positive light than they currently do today. So hopefully the Swiss government may be doing a similar thing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Amazing. Karl, thank you so much. Thank you, my friend, for the amazing question. Thanks a million for that, Karl. And what's great about that question there is it actually provides an amazing segue to our next keynote. Firstly, thank you, Karl. Big make some noise for Karl. Thank you.